This episode of New Media Lab is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Welcome once again to the New Media Lab. I am your host, Rob Southgate. Today's special guest is Taryn Arnold from Patreon. I get to ask all sorts of questions about best practices, what works, what doesn't, and get some really fun insights from her too about Patreon and what people do that works. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Taryn, it's all yours. Taryn, thank you so much for joining me in the New Media Lab. I'm so excited to have you here.
Dude, I'm so stoked. Thank you for having me.
Now, do you do a lot of these types of interviews?
You know, I just ran into a coworker in the hallway and I was like, I'm on another podcast today. It's becoming a thing. I think this is probably my 6th or 7th, but in the last maybe 10th, but in the last week, it's been a lot. I've maybe done 4 or something.
Wow,
like
cool.
Yeah, but it's fun. I like it. I mean, there's nothing better to do than talk about things you love. So
yeah, I agree. I sabotaged my whole life to do that.
A beautiful sabotage.
Yes. So, the reason, it might be the reason you're getting so many requests. I got an email from you and it said that you're kind of the Patreon outreach person. And I went, finally, somebody. Yeah.
Well, we're realizing that a lot of more people want to talk about this and want to talk about Patreon, and I am all ears. I would clear my day to do this kind of stuff. It's so fun for me. So I'm happy that you reached out.
So, all right, Taryn, let's set this up. You're from Patreon, and
yes.
you're kind of the liaison between the creators and Patreon and kind of answer questions and stuff, right?
Yeah, yes, I'm in charge of brand and content here. But what that's becoming is if anybody wants to tweet me, if anyone wants to interview me, if anyone wants to call me, I am all ears to answer questions. I love talking about it. It's an easy thing for me to do. I've been here for a little bit over a year. I think I was the 20th employee or something. So I've just been around for a bit and yeah, I love to dish any information, the limited knowledge that I have on it. I love to try to share.
Right now, I want you to throw out your Twitter and any way that they can reach you. We'll do it again at the end, and I'll put it in the show notes, but throw it out there right now. So anyone listening that's like, you know what, I really just need to ask her a question. Right now, tweet to Taryn. What is it, Taryn? It is
Twarin. I love that. I wish it was that.
I completely screwed that up.
I wish it was Twarin. My Twitter I can be reached on Twitter at the Taryn Arnold, which is the Taryn and then Arnold. And then I do this for podcasts. I trust that you're if you're going to email me, you're a great person. Please be nice. Don't yell at me for anything I've said. My email is Taryn@patreon.com, which is Taryn.
Yeah, and that's something that we found, I've been interviewing different people from different, resources for content creators. And that truly is something that I found is most people just want to answer questions and be cool. And, if you've got some kind of negative that you want to throw out there, please remember these are human beings,
I don't get a lot of hate or I don't get a ton of issues. One thing that I do see a lot of when I give out my Twitter handle or my email is people will email with product requests or things that they wish they could see different, which I'm more than happy to respond to. But we do have at Patreon support Twitter handle, and that they are full-time dedicated waiting to answer those questions. So to get a more immediate and thorough response, that's definitely the way to go.
Oh, excellent. That's good advice. Yeah, I had Parviz from Clamor on, and he's very hands-on. He's one of the creators of it. And he was almost the opposite. It was contact me. This is, you got a problem? Tell me. And it's funny because there were a couple of things that he and I talked about off the show that I'm seeing Clamor actually right away. He said, it's a great idea. And I'm starting to see some of that stuff happen. So people really do listen. And I know Patreon is that same way. So.
Yep. That is good news to hear. I love that.
So, okay, let's talk about what Patreon can do. Now, what we do on this show is we talk to content creators, anybody that's involved in new media, and it's a pretty broad cut. I mean, I get emails from people that are artists. I get emails from people that are podcasters, bloggers, YouTube creators. I know a guy who runs a coffee shop that writes me because he gets a lot of information from this. So any of these people are game for Patreon, right?
Anybody. Yes. Before I worked here, I thought, okay, so there's major categories of people that are on Patreon. There's, podcasters, YouTubers, there's webcomics, there's painters. But now that I've worked here long enough, there are, everything you can possibly imagine is here on Patreon. And that's like a really special and cool thing to be able to say. But, yes, if you run a coffee shop, you are more than welcome to join Patreon. If you run a cat adoption place, you can join Patreon. I say that because they are on Patreon.
They're all there, huh?
That is, yes, there are things like that. So yeah, anyone is game.
So one of the things when I first started using Patreon, we're going to go back on this a little bit, so that you kind of get a history. We have, I think, 3 Patreon accounts set up. I'm going to ask you about that a little bit. But before I do that, when I first started, one of the things I did was I looked up podcasts. I went into search and I typed in podcasts. I didn't find a lot. And what I found, I wasn't really like digging what they were doing. Now when I look, I see a lot more people on there. I do see some other things. One of my questions right there is there anybody who's doing podcasts, we'll start there, that you say, yeah, you know what, they really got it right. They're doing a great job on Patreon, somebody that you might want people to look at?
That is a great question. There are tons of people that are just crushing it. Specifically in podcasting, I think it works really well with the model and what Patreon does. I think it's just like a really natural connection for people because, podcasters are always pushing content. It's pretty regular. They have like a pretty set schedule of the way they release things. And, podcast fans are fans. Like those are people that like you. They like what you make. They listen. They stick around. And so it works really well with Patreon. But people that I think are doing it really well, let's see. I'm just going to name drop for a second. Star Talk Radio is on here, which is Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is really crazy that he's on Patreon. But they do it well. There's also Tom Merritt, who does the Daily Tech News Show, is on Patreon. Right now, I'm pulling it up right now. He gets $15,000 per month. He has almost 5,000 patrons. He just he's such a great example of keep making. That's like one of our biggest tips for people. They're like, how do I do Patreon? What's the best way to do art? What's the best way to get fans? What's the best way? And a lot of it is, just don't stop making things. And people get so hung up on the thing that they're making and like the one bit, I'm really putting all my soul into this one podcast and then I send it out and, it didn't get the reaction that I wanted. I'm just going to sit here and cry for a little bit. Like there's no time for that in this world. Like everyone is making.
You're not kidding.
There's just no time for that. Like by the time you spend crying, there's been 30 more podcasts in your avenue that have just released. So it's like you just make the next thing and hope that it's better or find small tweaks to make. Anyway, when you land on the Daily Tech News Show, on their Patreon page, which is just patreon.com/DTNS, his first line is Tom Merritt has done more than 2,000 episodes of the Daily Tech News Show. You're just like, wow, this guy just keeps on rocking. And you can see with his rewards and his milestones and his goals and all these things, he just, he does a really awesome job with Patreon. And, he's a great example.
Now, you know what? It's great. I'm glad you brought this one up because I pulled it up and he is rocking it.
Crushing.
And this is a single show. This Daily Tech News is a single show. Now, I always have this position that's a little bit different because my wife and I own a network. We have 87 shows. And it puts us in a weird position when I look at Patreon, and I think this is why I've struggled with it. He's making $15,000. We're making $2 a month right now.
Oh, my heart.
Yeah, and it, trust me, it hurts because this is all we do.
Yeah.
Now,
so can I ask you a question? What is how do you make your $2?
How do I make her? You mean on Patreon?
Yeah, I guess. Okay, got it. Yes, got it. So I thought for a second there, I thought you were saying in general you're making $2, which it wouldn't be that crazy because that's what happens with YouTube, and the way that they value a view on YouTube is just like the worst thing ever. But okay, good. So just $2 on Patreon. Not that that's good,
Patreon.
but
no, it's terrible. But. Actually, I'll address that in a second. We're going to actually go to mine and we're going to look at it. But
Great.
What I wanted to say about Daily Tech News is this is something that was – well, I had two thoughts here, so let's get them both out at once. Really confuse people. First of all, on Daily Tech News, when I look at it and I'm looking at the rewards, this is critical because when I was first looking at it, when I told you I was trying to find podcasts that did it, the rewards were ridiculous. And – a lot of the things I found were like pledges up to, $10,000. If you do this, our podcast. And I'm thinking, who's doing that? And what a waste of time. And I even did it because I thought this is what you do. I'm looking at his. He's got $1, $5, $10, and $20. That is tight. I could totally see people doing the $20. I can totally see the 1, the 5, the 10. And it makes a lot of sense. It just felt like I wasn't finding an example that worked. And we'll get to mine and we'll see that. Now, the other thought I had, and this is where I've had a stumbling block. So we have a lot of podcasts that we're friends with, and they have, a single show, right? Or maybe they have 2 or 3 shows. For them, whenever they've talked to me about it, I say, make a Patreon. If you have 3 shows, make 3 different Patreon accounts, 1 for each show, and kind of do your own thing. When we have 87 shows, I've wrestled with how do I manage 87 Patreon accounts? I set up 3 and got nowhere. I got to $2. On the main Southgate Media Group one, I set it up. I'm not sure if my rewards are right. I'm not sure if I'm getting the news out there the right way. For Nuff Said, which is our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, the only time we had success, and there we got up to, I think, $8 a month, was because at the $2 level, you got a free full-on show that was Patreon only. Number one, we loved that. And the people that got it were so responsive and loved it so much. But when you're only getting, $8 and you're like, wow, we're already doing 87 shows, $8 to do an extra show was not really attractive to keep going.
Not the way to do it. Yeah.
So what would you suggest? We're gonna go back to that after everybody's looked at Daily Tech News and gotten these great ideas. What would you suggest if you're a network versus a single show? Is it good to have something for each show? Is it good for something to have for maybe your top 20 shows? Is it good to have that plus have a main network show, Patreon? Well, plus on top of that, we now have YouTube and blogging and everything else. Do we need to get them for each of those things? I know.
Oh, it crushes. I hear you. And
it's
feel
a lot to do on $2 a month.
It's so much to do on $2. It's just not even, I'm sorry for that. That does not sound helpful or
when we're done with this conversation, it's going to change all that, isn't it?
Let's hope. Oh God, the pressure. The pressure. Yeah. Okay. So 2 things. First thing, I would say in response to your thought about rewards, we actually have data that says that high earning creators tend to have more than 2 reward levels. So a lot of creators think that just keeping it really simple, like, 1 reward or 2 rewards or something like that is the better thing to do. But we're finding that having options, and I have a graph in front of me that's showing number of rewards from 1 to 6. And the graph keeps going. But as it goes from 1 to 6, the graph just goes exponentially higher than the extra reward that you have, which is interesting. So
yeah, that is.
Yeah, the likelihood of processing at least $100 in your first month is at 12% if you have 1 to 2 rewards. Then it skips to 14% if you have 3, and then at 6, if you have 6 rewards, it's at 25% 2% or something like that. So it almost double. I mean, it really makes a change the more rewards that you have. And I would assume that the thought behind that is just that when people see options and they see other things that they can contribute to, they're more likely to dish out a little bit extra than what they were planning. So if there's only like a 1 and a 3 level reward tier, and then I saw a $5 reward tier that I was like, oh, I could do that. I kind of want that. But then you see the $10 one and you're like, well, man, I don't want to miss out on that. And then, it's like I think that thinking is probably what ends up happening to people. So anyway, so that's just on your first point. I think that's interesting to know, because I think if I was starting a Patreon page, which I might soon, who knows, I would think to have a smaller level of rewards and just hope that works well. But the data actually shows that the more level of rewards, or the more numbers of rewards that you have, the higher chance that you have of processing more money. Yeah. So very interesting.
Well, and he has 4 levels on there, and that seems like a pretty good amount. And I could see now his stops at 20. I could even see putting $100 one on there just in case. But anything above that, I mean, totally. Then it's really the only people doing it are your parents, right?
Yep. I mean, I would hope not, but I would assume so.
Yeah.
And I mean, and another just thing to think about when creating your rewards is you're already making podcasts. You've got your extras that you're making. You've got all the editing, all the calling, all the interviewing, everything that you do. And the rewards that you offer shouldn't really be extra work for you. They should really be letting people in on the things that you're already doing. So if you see, again, Daily Tech News Show is a great example of this. His rewards aren't extra things that he has to work and do. They're like, oh, you're a co-executive producer of the show. So he, puts your name on, his show or on his podcast or something like that. And it says, we'll even supply you with a template to make your own business cards. Like, that's just an email. That's an easy thing to send to him. And then, the second thing, or his $20 reward, is like a call-in Skype number so that you can
I just read that and I love that.
It's the coolest. And so, that's not extra work for Tom to do. That's just Tom doing what Tom does. And he's letting people in on the process, other than people, or I guess why I enjoy this better is that if I say my $20 reward is I send you a t-shirt, it turns out it's probably going to cost me more money and time to send you a t-shirt than it is to even have you pledge that reward amount. So
that's where that was one of my sticking points. So I think a lot of people will see that and understand then that, they always say you got to spend money to make money, but maybe you don't have to do it at that level. Maybe at $100, it's worth sending a t-shirt.
Yeah, at $100, you say, hey, I'll give you all of these things and a t-shirt. And it's like, you know what? If someone is pledging to me $100 per month, that's a chunk of change for someone to just like my podcast.
Yeah.
I will send them a shirt. I'll show up at your house. Right. I will send you myself and hug you.
We had a funny one on ours where I think it was at the $500 level. We're like, you have the power to fire us and take the show.
Yes.
As long as you pay it, it's all yours,
Totally. I have one of my friends, Allie Spagnola, is on Patreon, and I'm going to find it right now because it's so epic. She has a $250 per video reward tier that is called Friends IRL in real life. And it says, come to Los Angeles and we'll hang out. Bring a friend or your mom or your dog or something. We can get coffee, drinks, whatever. You obviously are responsible to get your butt out here, but I will, buy you your first drink. And I saw pictures. There's one patron that is doing this, and he went out and hung out with her in LA, and she was like live Snapchatting the whole thing. And it was like, I'm with my patron. This is so crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, long way around to just tell you that your rewards shouldn't be a hassle for you. These are people don't want you doing extra work. They want you crushing what you're doing and letting them in so they can see like the behind the scenes of what you're doing. I think those are the rewards that really captivate people and get them to pledge and give them the most rewarding, I guess, feeling.
Now let's go back to the question I had, the big one for network people. And this is also goes for, I mean, I'm talking podcasts, but YouTubers, bloggers, anybody runs into this. So do you suggest having one for each show? Or do you suggest doing it like one overarching? The overarching one seems like, or I think both, but I'm not sure how to do both. What do you think?
I was going to ask, what are your different shows? Like, can you give me a handful of different things that you're doing under the same umbrella?
Yeah, I'll give you a good cross section. So we do a lot of TV-based stuff. So one of our shows, one that we set up a Patreon account for already, is the Nuff Said podcast. And that one deals with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Marvel, okay? So that was the one we had a little tiny sliver of success with. We also have, I did one for Ever After, which is a Once Upon a Time podcast. I was planning on doing one for this show, for New Media Lab, because this gets so much attention. And a lot of people respond on this one. I thought, you know what? It would probably be a good idea to have a Patreon for this. We have a lot of geek centric, but then we have things like, we have a serialized audio book that's just wrapping up, and we're about to start another one. We have one about Pinterest, which is more of a, social media focused business one. We've got a lot of subjects. If there's a subject that you're interested in, we probably have a show about it in some way.
Interesting.
Now, with the YouTube channel, we have one channel, and then I use categories there. So our Walking Dead show, I take those shows, I turn them into YouTube shows. We're starting to put original content there, but that takes time and money. So right now I'm using our already recorded podcast, just like you were saying, use something you already have and adding to it. Now, one of our guys, Jack from the Nuff Said podcast, he's one of my guys. He's like my closest friend. Jack suggested the other day that when we record Nuff Said, at the very end, we record, I don't know, for 5 or 10 minutes, a video thing. And he goes, we can put it on Patreon. We can use it for whatever, but it's something unique. It's not taking any time that we're not already doing. It's just us behind the scenes talking smack like we do. I mean, we probably spend a half hour talking smack to each other every show. And that to me sounds like something like when he said it, I thought, well, that might be a good reward, or it might be good YouTube fodder. So does that give you an idea?
Yeah, definitely. So
here's what I would think. Live shows too. We do live shows, and we produce so many different things in that live event. That alone could have 10 Patreons attached to it.
Man, Rob, you keep yourself busy. What in the world?
It's ridiculous. I'm just starting a master's program. I go tonight for my orientation. Get out.
My gosh. Well, cheers. Good luck to you, good sir. So here's what I would say. I generally tell people, if their fans fall in the same vein, if you think that a majority of your fans listen to all of your things, I would put it all on one page. I would just say, hey, this is our umbrella page. You help do all of these different things. Thank you so much. Help keep us alive. If your fans are pretty split and you think like, hey, I'm a huge fan of the Nuff Said podcast, not a big fan of one of the other ones, then I would think that instead of setting up 87 different Patreon pages, I would recommend setting up a page maybe for one or two of the podcasts that you have that have the most engaged listeners, the most, I guess, promise in your eyes for a Patreon page, and like putting all your energy into those two things. I would even recommend just doing one and seeing what works and what doesn't, but it actually might be kind of fun to split test and do two. And see what kind of different rewards people respond to, or how much energy it takes to push one on social media versus the other, and how that turns into patronage. And from that, I would build other pages based on the response of the two separate ones that you do have. I just think if it's going to split your audience and you think that someone's like, oh, I wanted to be a patron, but not of this thing, but definitely of this thing, then I would recommend doing different pages, but I wouldn't launch them all at the same time. I would start with it with maybe 2 max and play from there.
And we've already done that. So it'd be good if we could tweak what we've got going with those 2 and start building on that. Okay. That's a great answer. Now, You mentioned in there social media. How do people let other people know they have a Patreon? How do they get that out there? Because I'll mention it at the end of the show. We'll mention it here and there. The way we got the Enough Said things is we put a little thing at the end, and we put it on our YouTube thing at the very end. We put a Patreon logo and say, please support us on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
What do people do? What do you suggest?
Oh man, there are so many things to do. So the biggest, I mean, here's my thing. Sometimes I tweet something out, something I think is funny, and I'm like, oh, this is going to get some love. This is a funny tweet. Great job, Taryn. And then people don't see it. There are a billion tweets in like a second. I mean, that's probably not the right
It's ridiculous.
Stat, but it's like I can't even find my own tweet after I refresh the page. I'm like, where the hell did that go? So I think when you think about that and when you realize like, man, I feel like I might be annoying my fans because I tweeted out 4 times in the last week about my Patreon page, they probably didn't see it. Like odds are they like haven't seen it. They don't know what you're doing. I would start with pre-launch of a page. You get people excited about it. We just had a huge launch by this group called Easy Allies. If you go to patreon.com/ I think it's just /Easy Allies, they are just rocking. Like it's not even, I'm pulling it up right now.
Holy cow, $37,000 a month.
It's something. So they're $37,000 a month. These guys had a following, and their show, I don't want to butcher this, but I want to say like their show was shut down elsewhere. They couldn't keep doing it where they were doing it. They thought they were going to quit. Oh no. All their fans are like, whoa, I am a fan of you. I want you to keep going. So they start, before they launch their Patreon page, they say, hey, we have a special announcement on this date. And they start, every guy in the group is tweeting like this ominous, eerie date that's like a week in the future or something. And everyone's like, okay, what's that? And so everyone's like, then they start tweeting, get excited, this date, those types of things, and really just drumming up the anticipation. And then when they launch, obviously the date was for their launch of their Patreon page. When they launched, they did I want to say it was like a 11 to 12 hour live stream that they stayed live, and they were like, hey, join us on this live stream. Today's a huge day for us. Come chat. They were totally there with their fans. They were on social media throughout the entire day. They're tweeting, they're Facebooking, they're doing everything that they can to keep people engaged and stoked and to remind them that they're launching. Like they made an event out of it. And
yeah.
I think that's the thing to do. I'm imagining if I had a handful, if I had a bunch of fans and I'm starting a Patreon page, I don't know that many people are going to sit and watch me do a live stream, but I'll do it. Like I want people to know that I'm doing something on social media, at least during the launch phase, is just constant reminders and almost being like a little annoying. Like I'm kind of a fan of just like telling people more than you should. Then obviously once you're already launched, you add any type of like in your podcast, you add multiple times that you're like, hey, this is supported by Patreon if you want to check this out, whatever. Or on videos, we have a creator and someone who's actually become a friend of mine. His name's Peter Hollins. He's on Patreon. He does acapella videos. He talks a lot about every time that he finishes a video, no matter how big it is, or if there's like 5 million views, whatever, he has a 30-second to 1 minute thing at the end where he's, the costume is over. He's just in his regular clothes. He's just a normal guy again. And he's looking straight into the camera and he's just thanking people for supporting him on Patreon, telling people that's how it's possible, and pushing people to his Patreon page. And like that just moment of him being so real, like you're like, wow. I trust this guy. I want to listen to this guy. I want to check out his Patreon page. I don't even know what Patreon is, but I'm going to go check it out. It's any time that you can do a real reminder to your fans and a real thank you and just like full transparency, like, hey, this is how this works. I think is a great way to plug it and to talk about it.
Now, this brings up another question.
Yes.
I've noticed from looking at some of these, some people are of the mindset that you have to have this promo video. Other people are like, you know what? It doesn't really matter as long as you've got your logo and that there. Has there been any studies that say definitely have a video? And what are your thoughts on that? Like I was starting to do one and I had so many people jumping in saying, no, it's got to be, like super professional and you got to hire people. And I'm going, that seems like you were saying way outside of what I want to do. What are your thoughts on the video part of it? Is it necessary?
I personally think it's necessary. Like, that's my favorite part of getting to people's Patreon pages is when you land on their page and you see their video and you're like, oh, cool. I can't wait to see what they have to say and what they're doing. Because a lot of people just honestly don't want to read. Like, unless you're a writer, people don't want to read like a big chunk about your story. And I feel like it's just easier to connect with people when you are looking at them and you can see what they're doing and thinking. So I think it's necessary. I don't know if we have stats on what a video does. I could probably get those for you, but I mean, I don't know why it would be a bad idea unless it's like a really bad video. Like, unless you're using like a old flip phone to record it, and it's like I don't know. It
makes sense to me to have the video. What didn't make sense is the amount of pressure to make it like this completely produced, and I'm like, boy, that's not how we roll here, you know? Yeah. But we also come from the world of zines and, like guerrilla marketing. That's what this whole company was based on. So I have a hard time with that. If you're not just jumping in and saying, no, pay to have a fully produced video, then I'm going to go along the lines of do something that shows your passion and get your message across, but don't let those professional moments hinder you. Make sense?
No, totally. If you were okay, here's the difference. If you were a video creator and you made these epically beautiful 4K videos, and then you
better have that in your video, right?
Yeah. If you come out with like this tchotchke of a video, I'm going to be like, man, you could do better than that. I know that. But if you're a podcaster, then the best thing that I can imagine you doing is a video of you sitting in front of your microphone saying, hey, this is my studio. This is where I do what I do. This is my computer. This is my whatever. Bringing people into what you're doing and then being like, I don't know if you're on video often, but like, I just think unless it's like pretty bad, then I would love a video. I would love to see what like my favorite podcaster looks like. Again, on Daily Tech News Show, if you go back to his page, I haven't pushed play because I don't know how loud it's going to be if I do, but the freeze frame of his picture or of his video on his page is him sitting in front of his microphone in his studio. It's not like some wildly, he has got like a suit jacket on, but who knows? He might not have pants on. You don't know these things.
Also, when you look at it, he's a podcaster. He probably doesn't. When you look at this picture, though, it also reeks to me of he's not a video guy. It's not lit exactly right. It looks like he made this thing and he's talking to the fans. I really like that.
I do too. I want to see what you guys look like when you're just like sitting there. That's what I care about. I don't need you to hire like a crew to come and follow you around and give me this like false look at your life,
Yeah. All right. We don't have much more time. Okay. I am going to want you on this show again. I have a feeling we have so much more to talk about.
Yes.
But before we do that, I want you to go to let's go to the Nuff Said page. Okay.
So that's patreon.com. Is it just /Nuff Said?
Probably Nuff Said podcast. See, I don't even know because I don't use it that much.
Come on.
That's going to change. That's why I had you on, Taryn. Here we go. Yeah, Nuff Said podcast.
Got it. I see.
Okay. So right there, you can see we've got a promo, an animated promo that we did. Mm-hmm. It's pretty basic stuff. And I've got the rewards laid out on the side there. Mm-hmm. I can tell right now that I'd like to change the logo up at the top. What do you think of this, though?
Let me see here.
And that promo video is not one promoting the Patreon page. So now that I see it, I'm already thinking I would like to do something promoting the page, but I would also do something creative with it. But if you look this over, what does that do for you? What is it like? Wow, Rob, this is a train wreck, or you've got the beginnings, make some changes?
I don't think it's a train wreck at all. This is like a very basic shell of what a Patreon page looks like. And I think this is like pretty spot on. What I would do is maybe under creator posts, like maybe add a few posts, some like free posts that people can see so that when they land on your page, they go, oh, this is like the type of thing that I would be getting if I was a patron. That's like one thing I would change. just because right now it's like a little bare once you scroll down after the video and the explanation. Then off the top of my head, let me see if there's anything else. I would add a reward in between 1 and 25, maybe a few, but since you don't have patrons right now, I would give people more of an option at the lower tier than larger things, because if I came here and I like saw that you didn't have any patrons and then I saw a $1 reward and a $25 reward, I'd be like, I think they're kind of dreaming right now. Like I wish I want to give more than $1, but I'm not ready to give 25. What if I could give 2, 4, 5, 7?
Yeah. And that goes back to what I was saying before. I definitely think these are out of whack.
Yeah.
Now here's an interesting thing. You said it doesn't have the creator posts, and maybe I did this wrong. If you go in, I do have those Daredevil shows we did for the Patreon only. Does that mean that doesn't show up? Because I know I could set it that way. Those are patron posts then. Is that correct?
Yeah. The patron. Okay. So what happens is under creator posts, the only thing that I can see if I'm not a patron yet is whatever you've made as a public post. So not a patron only post.
Okay.
So why it's good to have public posts there is because right now it looks like you haven't posted anything, which you have. It's just that you've made them patron only, but I can't see that. And that's something that we're working on our side, because it would be nice to know that there are things that were patron only. But for now, I can't see that you've made patron only posts. So I feel like I'd be pledging to something that I might not even be, are they active on this page? Do they do anything? So I would add a few, people aren't pledging in order for you to make podcasts. They're pledging so you can keep doing what you're doing. So, they're free anyway. You might as well add 2 or 3 of your last episodes and show people like what the posts look like, what they have inside. Also, when you go to patron posts, that will be, once I am a patron, I can comment on your page. That's what it's like a Facebook wall kind of.
Okay.
So that's what that part is.
And would you suggest, like with Enough Said, we have our podcast that we record every week, but then we also have some video things here and there. Would you suggest plugging in maybe having 2 podcasts and then 1 video, or should I keep that separate and just do the podcasts? What do you think?
Interesting. Since you're per month, you're not really bugging people. If you were to, post a few, like if you were per creation and then you were making a lot of paid posts of a lot of different things, I'd be like, oh man, I was not prepared to be paying this much money. But as a per month, I don't think it hurts to be, putting all the stuff that you have on here already.
And how much should you put on? Because like Enough Said itself, there are 3 to 4 shows every week on this feed. We're probably at 250, 300 posts, plus then we have video, and we have blogs attached to it.
Wow.
Would you say put maybe 10 podcasts on, or would you say take the time, start putting them all on there and fill this thing up? What do you think?
I would maybe fill it with your last month's worth of stuff.
Okay.
Or maybe, maybe the last. Since you guys post so much, it actually you might not need to. You could just post maybe the last week. It sounds like you'd have at least like 5 things to post or something like that over the last week. Yeah. So starting there isn't the worst idea. And just so people have like an idea of what they'd be getting, if they're fans, they've probably seen everything that you posted already. So I wouldn't waste too much of your time backfilling. But I think that you can do something with just your most recent stuff. So it's not so blank.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that answered a lot. I definitely, after I make some of these changes, I'm definitely going to want to swing back and ask you about this. And I think from a listener standpoint, they'd probably want to know what happens. So maybe we'll give it a couple of months and then I'll reach out to you if you're willing and we'll have you on again. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. I would love to.
Taryn, one more time, give that social media, tell them how they can reach you. And then I suggest everyone kind of follow along as I change the Enough Said podcast and the Southgate Media Group podcast Patreons. So go ahead, Taryn, give your info.
You can reach me on Twitter. The best place to reach me it would be on Twitter at the Taryn Arnold, TheTarynArnold.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's it. Once again, thank you so much, Taryn.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to hear.
New Media Lab is a Southgate Media Group production. Produced, mixed, edited, and hosted by Robert Southgate. If you enjoy New Media Lab, you'll love New Media Lab's Social Media Monday on the same feed. You can listen and subscribe to New Media Lab on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcast directory. Please rate and especially review on iTunes or wherever you found our show. Reviews keep the New Media Lab on the charts, which helps other people find us. Additionally, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Southgate Media Group. Oh, and don't forget to visit our website at www.southgatemediagroup.com/New Media Lab, where you can also find past episodes and all our other content. Thank you so much for listening to New Media Lab, and keep creating.